Hello friends, welcome to the HFY Ode, where we bring you new science fiction stories, a new world, a new adventure. And yes, there is no robotic or AI voices here, only real human voices with real human touch. So let's start this journey, and please subscribe my channel if you like the stories and press the bell icon for the latest updates. Let's have a story. Okay.
Jackster had finally done it. He had cornered a human. The creature was small, soft, and looked utterly unremarkable, exactly like the other 37 humans currently held in Harvest Ship Indomitable Claws Processing Bay. But this one was special. This one had run. For 3 ship cycles, it had evaded every patrol, slipped through every scanner, and hidden in places no prey should have fit. But now it stood with its back against a bulkhead, arms raised in that strange, useless gesture all humans defaulted to when cornered. Jackster would do his clutch proud. He raised his neural whip and prepared to fire. The whip was a masterpiece of Cathar engineering. It didn't sting or burn. It reached directly into the nervous system and unwound it, slowly, carefully, like pulling threads from a tapestry. A single strike could reduce a prisoner to a weeping, compliant shell within minutes. 3 strikes could erase everything they had ever been. The human would beg. They always begged. "Any last words, pray?" Jackster hissed, his forked tongue tasting the air. The human smelled of fierce sweat and something else, something metallic and sharp. Caffeine, perhaps. The humans drank a poison called caffeine to stay awake, baffling species. The human lowered its arms slightly. "Yeah, is there a form for this?" Jackster ignored him. He squeezed the whip's activator. The weapon hummed to life. Energy crackled along its length. Jackster had used this weapon on 17 species. It had never failed. He struck. The neural whip connected with the human's chest. Nothing happened. The human looked down at the glowing tendrils wrapped around his torso. He poked one. "That tickles a little," he said. "Is it supposed to do that?" Jackster fired again, then again. The whip was not jammed. Its power cell was full. Every indicator light glowed green. But there was no screaming, no collapsing, no unwinding of consciousness. The human just stood there, arms crossed now, looking almost bored. "I'm going to need that in triplicate," the human added. Jackster stared. And that was when he noticed the broader change. The ship's alarms had been screaming for the last 4 hours, a cacophony of warning tones that had burrowed into Jackster's skull like nesting parasites. But now, suddenly, there was silence. Not the dimming of sound, but its complete absence. The kind of silence that pressed against his eardrums like water pressure. The vibration of the engines had stopped. The distant shouts of other hunters had vanished. Even the low hum of the lights had died. Everything here was frozen in time. Jackster spun around. A Cathar guard stood in the corridor behind him, mid-stride, 1 foot raised but never falling. Another human prisoner in an adjacent cell was frozen mid-blink. Droplets of condensation from a cracked coolant pipe hung in the air like jewelry. He briefly wondered if some rival species had deployed a temporal stasis field. Perhaps the attack collective had finally found them. Perhaps a wayward singularity had ushered his demise. Surely there was no way he was still living. And that's when he heard it. Someone walking. Though it was not the sound one would expect on a warship. It wasn't the clank of armored boots or the scrape of claws on deck plating. It was the gentle, rhythmic tap of what sounded like dress shoes on polished marble. Tab, tab, tab. Coming closer. Jackster spun to face the source of this noise. It looked entirely wrong. It was vaguely bipedal, and though its general shape more closely mirrored the humans than his own kind, it was not any color Jackster had a name for. If pressed, he might have said the color of an unanswered email, a sickly, anxious beige gray that seemed to shift at the edges. He couldn't make out any finer details. The being was too blurry, like heat shimmer over engine exhaust, almost as if it was flicking in and out of existence 1,000 times a second. The effect made Jackstier's primary eyes ache and his secondary eyes water. He leveled his neural whip at the sudden intruder. "That will not do you any good," the creature said. Its voice was utterly flat. Not deep, not high, not menacing, not friendly. It was the vocal equivalent of a blank form, a waiting room in audio form. "I mean you no harm," it continued, "but I cannot allow you to proceed with your current course of action." Jackstier narrowed all four of his eyes at this thing. "What do you mean?" The being gestured vaguely at the human, who remained frozen mid-scratch of his nose. "This human you plan to break. He must live through this war. Again. Again." "Apologies." The being's flat tone did not change. "You will not be the one to process him." Jackstier's neural whip hummed with ready energy. "And you plan on stopping me?" "Oh, have I not?" the being inquired. It sounded genuinely curious, as if the answer were not obvious to it. Jackstier looked around. The frozen corridor, the silent alarms, the impossible stillness. All of this was somehow its doing. He suddenly felt very small and very tired, though he would never admit the latter. "Are you a god?" he asked tentatively. The being seemed to consider this. "Such an imprecise word," it replied. "However, I suppose if it helps you to comprehend the situation you now find yourself in for simplicity's sake, let us say yes." Jackstier's throat tightened. "Then why do you care about one human?" The being stepped past him, through him. For a moment, though, Jackstier felt nothing and stood over the frozen prisoner. "This specific human," it said, "has a specific purpose, and as such now has specific protection." "But we capture humans all the time," Jackstier protested. "We've taken 37 in this cycle alone. They're weak. They break easily. They scream beautifully." "Yes," the being said, "and I mourn their screams." It reached down and adjusted the human's collar. One small tug, then a brushing off of invisible dust. "But not this one, not today, and certainly not by the likes of you." That last bit stung. The likes of him. Did a god, an actual god, believe him unworthy? Jackstier's claws dug into the grip of his neural whip. "As far as I can see, this is just another soft, frightened animal. What makes him worth a god's attention?" The being stood there for a long moment. Then, with a motion that seemed almost theatrical, it gestured to a nearby maintenance panel. It sat down on the panel, which was not designed to be sat upon, and folded what Jackstier assumed were its legs. "Boredom," it said. Jackstier waited. The being did not elaborate. "I don't understand," Jackstier finally said. 412. "What?" The being's flat voice somehow managed to convey patience, like a teacher explaining addition to a particularly slow student. "There are, by our count, 412 sentient species that sail between the stars. Each has developed warfare, politics, art, and philosophy. Each has its own rituals, its own cruelties, its own mercies." It paused. "And yet only these creatures here, the humans, have ever invented the concept of, 'I'll need that in writing.'" Jackstier was still flabbergasted. "What?" The being made a sound that might have been a laugh, though it came out like a printer clearing a paper jam. "I know, such a simple phrase, such an uncomplicated request, a demand for documentation, for accountability, for a paper trail." It leaned forward slightly. "You must understand, Jackstier of the Cathar, your species has never once asked for a receipt. The Attack Collective has no word for appeals process. The Vorn Ascendancy executes anyone who requests a second opinion. Across 412 civilizations, the idea of bureaucratic delay simply does not exist." Jackstier shook his head, confused. "Why would it? Suffering is efficient, clean. You hurt someone enough they comply. Forms are weakness." "Forms," the being replied, "are endurance." It pointed one blurry finger at the frozen human. This man, his name is David, by the way, not that you asked, was a mid-level claims adjuster for an insurance company before he was conscripted. He spent 11 years processing paperwork, denials, appeals, resubmissions, requests for supporting documentation. He once delayed a legitimate medical claim for 18 months using nothing but a rubber stamp and a poorly phrased exclusion clause. Jackster stared at the small, unremarkable creature. That's not a weapon, that's a desk job. The being's color flickered briefly. Jackster thought he saw amusement. You believe suffering is the only tool. You believe pain breaks things, but David here, he has never been broken because pain requires care. Pain requires attention. David's supervisors ignored him for a decade. He worked in silence in a cubicle under fluorescent lights that flickered just slightly out of phase. He processed 300 forms a day. He received no thanks, no recognition, no punishment. He simply continued. The being stood up. That is what I find amusing, not the screaming, the endurance, the absolute bone-deep refusal to stop asking for the proper documentation. It walked a slow circle around the frozen human. And this one, this small, tired, under-caffeinated man, will be the one who teaches the Vorn ascendancy what a waiting period means. He will introduce the concept of processing time to an empire that has never waited for anything. He will be a focal point of great hilarity. Jackster was absolutely stunned. A war stopped on a whim for the sake of paperwork. Gods truly were ineffable, if not just a little insane. And that, the being concluded, is why you will not be breaking him today. Jackster's neural whip hung at his side, still humming, still ready. But his arm felt heavy. His pride felt heavier. But I have hunted him for 3 cycles, he said quietly. My clutch will mock me. My honor demands. Your honor, the being interrupted, demands nothing. It is a story you tell yourself to justify cruelty. I have watched 17,000 species invent honor. It always smells the same. Another insult, another wound to his pride. But the being continued, some faint note of something, curiosity, amusement. Creeping into its flat voice, I will give you a choice. Jackster raised his head. You can either lay down your weapon and I will give you 1 minute to walk away, find somewhere else to hunt, pretend this never happened, or... Lord! The being's blurry form sharpened for just a moment, and Jackster saw something that looked almost like a smile. Or you can know what it feels like to be assigned to permanent data entry. We have a backlog on Form 87B, Declaration of Intent to Exist, that stretches back 3 millennia. It requires a signature from the original claimant, who has been dead for 2,000 years. You would be responsible for locating her next of kin. Jackster's claws scraped the deck. That's not a threat, that's absurd. It is both, the being said pleasantly, and it is forever. The neural whip powered down. Jackster lowered it. Excellent decision, the being said. Not much of an option, Jackster mumbled. Yet it was still there, and you made the right one. Jackster's spines flattened, a sign of deep displeasure among his kind. I'll meet your conditions, but I have one of my own. If a being the color of an unanswered email could look ecstatic, this one did. I like you. Allow me to hear it. I want 1 hour, Jackster replied. The being's color flickered. 1 hour. My methods have never failed. 17 species, thousands of prisoners. If I cannot break this single human in 1 hour with no interference, I will walk away. I will tell my clutch nothing. I will vanish into the void like a coward. He paused. But if I succeed, you let me keep him. The being's form flickered faster. Its flat voice cracked slightly as if it didn't know what was happening. 1 hour is. Then its color brightened, a flash of something almost yellow, almost warm. Oh, it said. Oh, you're up to something, aren't you? Of course I'm up to something, Jackster hissed. Aren't you a god? Don't you know this already? Well, no, not now. The being sounded strangely disappointed. "I've interfered directly. That pollutes causality. It's all very complicated, and forgive me, but I do not particularly care to explain it to you." Another backhanded insult. Jackstier's jaw tightened. "Nonetheless," the being continued, some lifeless version of joviality trickling back into its tone, "I am sufficiently intrigued. You have your hour." The being turned to leave, or to fade, or to do whatever it was that cosmic entities did when a conversation ended. "Wait," Jackstier said. "Before you go, what does this human actually do that is worth all of this? What's his grand purpose?" The being paused, its blurry head tilted. "Spoilers," it chided. And then it was gone. The only evidence of its existence was the eerily still ship it left in its wake. And the frozen human, still mid-scratch, still utterly ordinary. Jackstier set his internal chronometer. 1 hour. Shaving off a few moments to be safe, gods lied, he was certain of that, he set to work. The first 15 minutes were humiliating. Jackstier tried the neural whip again, and again, and again. The human, David, the god had called him, sat on the floor of his cell and watched with what appeared to be mild curiosity. "Is that a stun setting?" David asked. "It is not," Jackstier growled. Could have fooled me." Jackstier switched to physical methods. Cathar claws could shred starship hull plating. He grabbed the human by the collar and David helpfully produced a small card from his pocket. "Before you continue, I'm going to need you to sign this." Jackstier stared at the card. It was an index card. On it, written in neat, blocky handwriting, were the words, "I print name. Acknowledge that I am about to inflict physical harm on the individual identified as David Chen. I understand that this harm is not approved by any recognized governing body. I agree to accept full liability for any and all consequences, including but not limited to paperwork, audits, appeals, and the potential involvement of a cosmic entity of undefined authority." Signature. "Where did you get this?" Jackstier demanded. "Prison pocket," David said. "You'd be surprised what you can fit in a prison pocket." Jackstier decided he did not want to know. He tore the card in half. David produced another one. "I have 37 copies." Jackstier screamed. It was not a proud moment. The next 20 minutes were worse. He tried sensory deprivation. He had the cell lights dimmed to near blackness. David sat in the dark and hummed what sounded like a commercial jingle from ancient Earth. He tried sensory overload, maximum illumination, sirens blaring. David closed his eyes and covered his ears and waited. "I worked next to a guy named Kevin for 4 years, David said over the sirens. "Kevin microwaved fish in the break room every single day. Your siren is not going to break me, my guy." Jackstier tried isolation. He removed all furniture, all blankets, all signs of comfort. The cell was bare metal and recycled air. David counted ceiling tiles. Then he counted them again. Then he started doing multiplication tables out loud. 12 times 12 is 144. 12 times 13 is 156. 12 times 14 is 168. "Stop that," Jackstier said. 42 times 42 is 1764. I said stop. 42 times 42 is. Jackstier turned off the lights again. David continued in the dark. 42 times 43 is 1806. Hey, is there any chance I could get a form requesting a transfer to a different captor? No offense, but you're not very good at this. At 45 minutes, Jackstier sat down in the corridor outside the cell. His spines were flat. His tail drooped. He had broken 17 species. He had made Yatak war leaders weep. He had reduced Vorn executioners to whimpering children. One human. One soft, small, poorly caffeinated human with index cards and multiplication tables. He could not break him. At 52 minutes, he tried one last thing. He opened the cell door. He stood aside. "Go," he said. "You're free. Walk out that airlock. I won't stop you." David stood up. He walked to the open door. He looked past Jacksteer at the corridor beyond. "Is there a form for that?" he asked. "No." "Then I can't. I need a paper trail. Otherwise, how do I know you won't just recapture me and claim I never left?" Jacksteer slammed his fist against the bulkhead. "You would rather stay in a prison cell than walk out a free creature because of paperwork." David thought about this for a moment. "Yeah," he said, "pretty much." The chronometer beeped. 1 hour. Jacksteer threw his neural whip down the corridor. It clattered against the deck plating and came to rest at the feet of a frozen Cathar guard who would never see it land. "Fine," Jacksteer said. "Fine, you win. I don't understand you. I don't understand any of this, but you win." He turned and walked away, not toward his quarters, not toward the hunting deck. He walked toward the command bridge where Warlord Vexcalan would be waiting for a report. Behind him, David's voice followed. "Am I supposed to stay in this cell or should I?" Jacksteer did not answer. The command bridge of the Indomitable Claw was a cathedral of violence. Weapons displays lined every wall. Trophies from a dozen conquered species hung from the ceiling, and at its center, on a throne made of melted starship armor, sat Warlord Vexcalan. He was massive, twice Jacksteer's size, with scars that crossed scars and a voice that could crack stone. "Hunter Jacksteer," the warlord rumbled. "You were assigned to process the runner. Where is your report?" Jacksteer stood at attention. His claws trembled just slightly at his sides. "My lord," he said, "the human cannot be broken." Silence. The bridge crew stopped working. Even the weapons displays seemed to dim. "Repeat that," the warlord said. "The human, the runner, David, I cannot break him. None of our methods work. He demands forms. He asks for receipts. He asks to speak to our supervisor." "He asks to speak to your supervisor?" "Yes, my lord," repeatedly. He also asked if we had a comment card. The warlord rose from his throne. He walked slow, deliberate, terrifying, until he stood directly in front of Jacksteer. "You are a decorated hunter," Vexcalan said. "You have broken 17 species, and you are telling me that a single, soft, poison-drinking human has defeated you with paperwork." "With respect, my lord, yes." The warlord's hand shot out and seized Jacksteer by the throat. Not enough to kill, enough to hurt. "You will go back to that cell," Vexcalan hissed, "and you will continue until the human screams. Do you understand?" Jacksteer did not struggle. He did not beg. He simply met his warlord's eyes and said, "My lord, I will need that order in writing." The bridge went absolutely still. Vexcalan's grip tightened. "What did you say?" "The god," Jacksteer said, "the one who froze the ship. It said I had a choice. I made it. If you want me to go back, I need a written directive, signed, dated, in triplicate, with a witness." The warlord's other hand reached for his sidearm. And from the doorway behind them, a calm, tired voice spoke. "Actually, he's right. You're going to need a Form 9B, direct order to subordinate under duress. I have copies right here." Everyone turned. David stood in the doorway. He was holding a stack of papers. The stack was thick, 200 pages at least, and he was already pulling a pen from behind his ear. "I took the liberty of filling out the header information," David said. "You just need to sign at the bottom and initial the margins, and there's an appendix, and a rider, and an addendum." He walked forward and placed the stack on a weapons display panel. "Also," he added, "I'm going to need to see your license to inflict corporal punishment, and your liability waiver, and your proof of insurance, and—" The warlord's sidearm came up. "Shoot him," Vexcalan ordered. No one moved. "I said shoot him." A junior weapons officer raised a hand. "My lord, we can't. He hasn't filed the proper authorization for execution. We're still waiting on approval from Division 7. Division 7 was decommissioned. They were reactivated last cycle for paperwork purposes. The warlord's eye twitched. For the first time in 200 years of conquest, Warlord Vexcalan looked genuinely confused. "How?" he said slowly. "Did one human do this to my ship?" David looked up from his forms. He smiled. It was not a cruel smile. It was not a triumphant smile. It was the smile of a man who had spent 11 years processing claims and had finally found an environment where his skills were appreciated. "Actually," David said, "I'd like to speak to your human resources department. I have some ideas about process improvement." The warlord lowered his sidearm. He walked back to his throne. He sat down, and in a voice that was very, very quiet, he said, "Get this creature out of my sight. Get all humans out of my sight. We are leaving this sector. We are never capturing another human again." David tucked his papers back into his pocket. "Before you go, I'll need a form confirming that decision, for my records." The warlord closed his eyes. Jacksteer, still standing at attention, felt something strange happen in his chest. It took him a moment to recognize it. He was laughing. Not out loud, that would be death, but inside, somewhere deep, the part of him that had once believed in honor was choking on its own absurdity. A god had stopped a war because humans were funny. And now, a warlord was retreating from a single unarmed man, holding a stack of forms. The universe, Jackster realized, did not run on fear. It did not run on pain. It did not run on honor or glory or any of the things his clutch had taught him to worship. The universe ran on paperwork. And humans, alone among the stars, had figured that out first. The indomitable claw had been reassigned to a quiet sector with no human presence. Jacksteer had been demoted 3 times. He now worked in Supply Division 14, processing requisition forms for cleaning solvents. It was the worst job he had ever had. And yet, every morning he sat at his terminal. Every morning he opened his queue. Every morning he saw 300 forms waiting for him. And every morning he thought of David, the small, soft, under-caffeinated human who had asked for a receipt while standing inside a prison cell. He thought about the god's words. "That is what I find amusing, the endurance." Jackster signed his first form of the day, then his second, then his third. He would never break another species. He would never taste the fear of prey again. He would never feel the thrill of a successful hunt. But he would outlast this queue. He would process every single form. And somewhere, in a dimension the color of an unanswered email, a being that was not quite a god was watching and laughing